Hello and welcome everyone to our webinar today. I appreciate you tuning in and checking us out. My name is Steve Kelder and I'm a professor at the UT School of Public Health in Austin, Texas, part of UTHealth Houston. And so let me, if you can go to the slides, please. I don't see them, Becca. There we go. So anyway, I work for the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living. Our motto is Healthy Children in a Healthy World, and we get involved with creating new educational materials or programs, policies. We try and connect individuals together so that we can all try and solve common problems. And then we try to communicate the results of what appears to be working. And so today we're going to do just that. The funding for this webinar comes from the Michael and Susan Dell Family Foundation, and the webinar is also hosted in partnership with Catch My Breath and the Catch Global Foundation. Many of you probably know about Catch My Breath. It's a youth vaping prevention program. It's widely available. It's free for schools to use, and it's also got a parent toolkit that I think you all might find is a good companion to today's lecture. And so the center resources, just a bit about the center before we begin today's show. We have our website, webinars, newsletters, experts, expert blogs, social media, and other things. And so if you go to this UPC code in the bottom right-hand side of the slide, then you can access these materials. We hope you take a quick look at them. We've got a lot of different webinars that you can look backwards in time about. And if you're interested in child health, you'll see many on a variety of different topics. And so again, we have engaged in a legislative initiative by providing policy resources. And so scan this UPC or scan this QR code and it'll take you to our different archives of Texas health policy resources, our legislative bill tracker. Well, now the session's over. Well, I think there's a special session coming up. Might not be exactly over, but during the legislative session, we track different bills, and you can see where they are and what they're about, and so on, as long as they're related to child health. So here at this code, you can view our center's webinars. So today we're going to talk about addiction, nicotine addiction, and specifically, and vaping too. And you know, just last week, there's a new Netflix show that came out on Juul and vaping, and it shows you how we got into this mess. And I will say it is a mess over the past 7-8 years. And so the result of all of this is that there's 2.5 million kids, middle school and high school, that are current users of e-cigarettes. 1 million of them smoke 20 to 30 days per month, and about 700,000 middle school and high school kids smoke every single day. And I think we can safely say those kids are probably addicted. And maybe those that smoke every other day or 20 times, 20 to 30 times. So we've got 1 million-ish teenagers, youngsters, who are vaping and are addicted. And you know, when I first started working in 2014 is when I started writing in the Catch My Breath program. And I did that because I was working on the Surgeon General report, and I was worried that this whole thing was going to become very popular, and indeed it did. And if you watch the Netflix series, you'll see exactly how that happened in all the gory details. But you know, we created Catch My Breath, and you know, I will say, every now and again, I Google Catch My Breath, and Kelly Clarkson's song, Catch My Breath, always came out on top. But today, maybe just because of this webinar, Catch My Breath, the vaping prevention program, was first in the Google search, and Kelly Clarkson was second. It is a very nice song, I will say. And one of the lyrics in there is, I ain't gonna take it anymore. And we don't wanna take this situation of addiction with teens really anymore. And so I'm a prevention expert. I wrote the program. It's about prevention, but it's popular. There's many school districts throughout the United States that use this program. But I continually hear back from schools and districts and parents like, what about cessation? What can we do for kids who are already addicted, those 1 million kids in the US? And you know, as a scientist and a researcher, I often look to the Community Guide for Preventive Services for advice about what is effective. We don't have a portfolio, let's say, of protocols to help teens get off of nicotine addiction. And what that means, we need to talk to our colleagues and friends in the mental health arena and in the counseling arena, in the pediatric arena, and substance abuse counselors and school counselors. And they have lots of experience. And so I won't say it's impossible to get a kid off of nicotine. It is, but there aren't any standardized protocols right now. Like I say, go here for sure, go to American Lung Association. So today, I was fortunate enough earlier in the year in May, when I attended our graduation ceremony at our School of Public Health, when Dr. Ikonne, our today's speaker, is going to talk to us about addiction. Her husband got his DRPH, and I met Shanaz for the very first time. And Eric Ikonne was an excellent student, and he has a heart as big as the Texas blue skies for kids and a passion towards trying to help. And then I met his wife, our speaker today, and I thought, now here's a power couple. They live, breathe, and work with kids. They're all about health. They're all about helping. And I thought, I really want to try and, at least offer some suggestions, which are a companion piece to the Catch My Breath program. If you look on the right-hand side of the GoToWebinar, you'll see different icons, audio, attendees, handouts, and chat. And so if you go to the handouts, I've got 3 different handouts, which are summarizing a bit of what Shanaz is going to talk about today. And if you have questions, leave them in the chat box. We have time at the end of this program to answer them. I will moderate it and read it back. Today we have a slightly longer, by the way, before I give the microphone over, we have a slightly longer. We're going to go into 1:15 because there's a lot of good and solid information that we need to cover today. And so I really hope that you find this a useful webinar. Let me just introduce Dr. Shanaz Ikonne, second-generation South Asian American who serves as a social justice advocate and a licensed professional counselor. As a proud owner of a Texas-based private practice with minority and women-owned certification, Shanaz wears many hats: a devoted wife, a mother, an engaging speaker, an insightful consultant, and an entrepreneur. Her work is dedicated to trauma-informed inclusive care, community education, and dismantling stigma around mental health. I think you have come into your professional light just at the right time, Shanaz, with removing stigma with mental health and drawing on a wealth of clinical expertise. She channels her skills into corporate consulting, striving to elevate the workplace culture and foster diverse, equitable, inclusive environments that champion well-being. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Shanaz, and I'm just so thankful that we met at graduation last May and that you're here today to join us and let our listeners know about today's topic.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Kelder and UT and the Michael Susan Dell Center of Healthy Living for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and today we're going to cover a lot of information. So for those that are attending live, I encourage you to stay towards the middle and end because that's where you're going to leave with your own personalized coping strategies, relapse prevention plan, and also how to have conversations to continue this talk outside of our time. It's also going to be recorded and you'll get more information about that. But let's go ahead and get started. And so why is it important to talk about vaping cessation with the mental health perspective? Well, we know that vaping and addiction are very closely correlated. We know that nicotine impacts the brain, especially the developing brain. And so what we're seeing right now is that there's a risk happening for mental wellness. And we're going to look and take more information and we can ask some questions towards the end. And so let's just go real quick to the beginning. In December 2018, the Surgeon General declared it to be an epidemic for e-cigarette use and that children and young users are being exposed. This generation is being greatly impacted by nicotine. And as you can tell, they've marketed since then. Studies have shown that in 2018, their budget went from $48 million for marketing to $110 million each year. And so they're marketing our youth, our adolescents, our children. As you can tell from Elf Bars products, they have rainbow candy. They have a lot of flavors that tailor to young appetites. And so let's just go ahead and dive in. We know that vaping is a mental health crisis. We also know it's a public health crisis. We know that last year, over 2.5 million have been impacted by this. 46% of high schoolers have reported to use 20 days or more. We know that within 30 days, that becomes a habit, a lifestyle. This becomes part of an addiction cycle that we'll talk more about. And so just to bring awareness that these numbers are still rising, and that it's important to address and understand what are e-cigarettes. Catch My Breath does a wonderful handout on how to identify e-cigarettes, vape pens, and shares more information. And so overall, the CDC found that 99% of e-cigarettes contain nicotine. That's a very high amount, especially for those who are not aware about labeling and packaging. Vape products tend to not disclose what's entirely in their product. And also keeping in mind that 99% of those that vape or use e-cigarettes are before their 25th birthday. And we're going to see a correlation between brain development, especially in the prefrontal cortex. That doesn't fully come online until you're about 25. And so we're going to look at the impacts about how it can harm your attention, your judgment, your learning, your mood, and even your impulse control. And so we're just going to take a look briefly at the trends. We saw that cigarette decline happened in 2018, but then the surge of vaping started to come to life because of marketing towards youth, towards students. And we know that there's over 15,000 e-liquid products with over 250 flavors. Most popular flavors consist of dessert, fruit flavors, things like that. And so we know that youth are buying these underage at gas stations, they can buy it online, and we know that over 17 million are being impacted through either direct advertisement or social media. And so this is having our attention for a long time. So let's talk about how it impacts the youth. Well, we know that in the last 30 days, 2.55 million US middle schoolers and high schoolers have vaped. We know also that adults tend to vape as well with a 4.5%, and that vape pens can also deliver other harmful substances, including THC, marijuana, and other substances. And so if we take a look, especially if there's somebody that's a teacher today, if you want to use the chat box and let me know where you're watching, if you're an educator, a caregiver, a parent, this is going to be helpful for me so that when you ask questions, we can answer them specifically. But if you think about your classroom, 1 out of 30, that's that you know of, thinking about your school, your classroom size, that this is impacting your students' health, their wellness, their ability to focus and engage with themselves and their peers. And then you think about it for high schoolers, it's 1 in 7. These numbers are very high, especially when they report that they used in the last 30 days. And so moving on to addiction and mental health. What is addiction? Well, addiction is a chronic disease. It involves the 4 C's is what we call it. They have harmful consequences, but it's going back to the compulsive drug-seeking behaviors. When you wake up, do you grab your vape pen? Or when you're stressed out or about to take a test or do something, what compulses you to engage in that behavior? Also, having the cravings, the consistent cravings about wanting more nicotine, especially when there's unresolved trauma, stress, and depression. Cravings can be very high, especially when you're trying to quit or reduce vaping. Also, there's a continued use of it despite negative consequences. Maybe you got kicked off the football team or suspended or removed from class or something else is going on at home, but you still continue to crave the substance. And also a loss of control. Nicotine can kind of overdrive your mind, and it can control how you think, how you feel, and it can feel really impossible to cut back, but we're going to share some strategies around breaking the addiction. And so how does nicotine addiction affect youth mental health? Well, the most common reason that youth engage in e-cigs is I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling depressed, really feeling overwhelmed. We know that vaping is associated with increasing mental illness, especially among depression and anxiety symptoms. Also, studies have shown that 90% of youth who do quit report a less use in terms of feeling anxious inside, feeling disconnected. Increased anxiety also diminishes over time. And so what we can take a look at now is how does it impact the mental health? We know that when it comes to nicotine withdrawal, symptoms can include irritability, restlessness, feeling overwhelmed and anxious, feeling lost, sad, or disconnected, even troubles focusing and concentrating. We know that the cravings can last up to 4 weeks, sometimes longer, depending on how chronically you've used the device, but the first week is always the hardest week. And so youth may turn to it to deal with stress, anxiety. It creates a cycle of dependence in terms of your mind and your body craving that substance. Nicotine addiction can also be a source of stress for those that are wanting to stop or those that are experiencing significant health or mental, emotional issues and challenges. The most common reason for young students and adolescents is that a friend introduced it to them. And so we can also take a look at how this impacts the social aspects of connection. And so thinking about nicotine withdrawals, the first thing to notice is what's happening in your body. What is causing the headaches? What is causing the fatigue? What are some signs and symptoms? And so we know the first week is the hardest week. Within 4 weeks, these symptoms tend to withdraw and get less and less. So you might notice if you have somebody in your life that stopping nicotine instantly is increased headaches, fatigue, feeling a sense of irritability, also feeling sad, maybe lonely, isolated. They might want to sleep in more, not engage with their friends or their community. Also a sense of brain fog, and also issues with thinking, making executive functioning, and choices. It also interrupts your sleep, and it can increase your appetite, and also leaving you feeling jittery and restless. And so we know that with nicotine, it impacts the brain specifically. And so let's talk more about it. So we know that the role of dopamine is also very important, which we'll touch base on, but going back, anxiety and stress are common features, especially when you're growing up and you're learning about your life, you're trying to fit in with the world. Individuals may vape to cope with mental health issues. The nicotine then intensifies these feelings, the racing thoughts, feeling out of control, and it stimulates the brain, causing a temporary relief, but it can also increase the mind and body. We know that nicotine increases your heart rate, it can increase your fight and flight response, and also create this deep sense of loneliness. So vaping may contribute to social isolation. Those that are using it may try to hide it to cope with their stress and anxiety. There might be feelings of shame or guilt, and isolation can further continue the use, and it creates an unhealthy cycle of dependence. Nicotine also impacts your dopamine levels, which we'll talk more about. We know that it can impact your dopamine receptors as well as your ability to think and feel, and it can worsen symptoms of depression, the loneliness, the tearfulness. We also know that there's an epidemic of loneliness that's affecting our country today, and we'll also share more about that. So let's jump into the role of dopamine. We know that dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It passes through our mesolimbic system. It's in control of our executive functioning. It's essentially the reward system, right? So when we experience dopamine release, there's pleasure, there's peace, there's satisfaction. It also motivates us to do something, right? So if you think about something in your day, doing one small thing like making your bed can actually increase your dopamine. Finishing small tasks. It also pertains to your developmental parts of your brain for motor control movement, attention, all the things that are needed for young adults to stay focused in class, to be attentive in school and outside of school. We know also that nicotine can impact the blood-brain barrier within 10 seconds of the first vape inhale. And so there's an instant feeling of gratification, and then the user is always chasing that feeling to get that dopamine release. Chronic users can experience that. It can impact the role of dopamine and how they can function and learn and execute decisions. And so let's take a look at how it impacts the mental health. So we know that it's already a very highly addictive substance. It impacts directly the reward system of your brain. It releases the dopamine. It's a pleasure reward system, so it keeps coming up and up every time you use it. It impacts your mood, your energy, and also impacts the mental wellness. If you have a coexisting issue, for example, say you struggle with depression, anxiety, stress, PTSD, any underlying issue, and then you add in nicotine, it can change your whole nervous system, the way that you respond to stressful events, the way that you interact, the way that you cope. And also self-medication tools, right? So maybe you're not sure that you have depression or anxiety, or that you're struggling to keep up with school, or you're having a hard time at home, or you're not feeling supported or cared for. That can also lead to using vape to release that negative energy. It can reinforce the addictive behaviors and also the patterns. We know that nicotine can impact the brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex. And so we know in terms of brain development, we'll pretend that this is the brain model. Our brains actually develop in utero from the bottom up. So imagine our brainstem, that's in charge of our gait, our walking, our heart rate, our respiratory functioning, our breathing, all of our essential organs develop in our brainstem. Then we move to our limbic system, which is our feelings, our emotions, our amygdala is there. Also, our dopamine receptors are located there as well. And then we get to the prefrontal cortex. That's the executive functioning, the ability to recall and remember, to engage with peers and colleagues. And that doesn't fully come online until you're 25. So imagine the chronic use of vaping nicotine, how it impacts and releases dopamine, how it also creates a cycle of dependence, and it limits the development of your prefrontal cortex, which is very important when it comes to making decisions. And so let's take a look at how unresolved trauma and socioeconomic factors play into the role of nicotine use and consumption. When I use the word trauma, trauma is anything that disrupts your sense of safety and anything that disrupts your sense of well-being. And so for those that have unresolved trauma, whether it's from their childhood, a car accident, a loss of a loved one, whatever that traumatic event is, if it's unresolved in the survivor, they're at a higher risk of developing an addiction to alcohol, substance use, both now and later in life. Studies have shown that you're more likely to struggle with academics, that you can't hold steady employment, that your relationships may struggle, financially you may not be secure, and most importantly, your sense of purpose can be lost. So thinking back at youth development and youth developing brains, during your adolescent period is when your brain starts to really grow and be shaped by your surroundings, nature versus nurture. All the factors allow your brain to thrive, and nicotine can actually stunt that development or create different pathways. Also thinking about youth, the autonomy, wanting to be independent, how that can impact their sense of purpose, connection, and of course, well-being. And so taking a look at socioeconomic factors, these are things in which the nicotine company is very aware of in terms of how they market. They've been shown to market in marginalized communities more heavily. They know that if they can target certain populations and geographics and economic groups, then they're more likely to catch the user. They know if 99% of users happen before their 25th, then they have a customer for life. And so they're going to pour in a lot of marketing strategies for marginalized communities, including Black, Indigenous families, LGBT communities, and of course, youth with lower SES status. We know that teens are 16 more times likely to engage in using a Juul device. And so studies are showing that marginalized communities are impacted greatly more than those around us. That's important to keep in mind as we move through the presentation. Also, other factors that affect youth, lower economic status, maybe not having access to an education, lack of resources, maybe not having enough food or adequate caregiver supervision, even those that are performing low in school. So imagine a caregiver having to work multiple jobs. They're not going to make it to your soccer practice. They're not going to be able to help pay for other extracurricular activities. They might be struggling to pay their own bills, and so that can impact how you form connections outside of that. Also going back to school, maybe school isn't a priority at this time because there's so many things happening at home. Perhaps there's a low self-image, low self-worth, other issues stemming from unresolved trauma and mental health, all things to consider and how people can get influenced by tobacco more easily than others. And so this is really important to include in terms of the loneliness, right? So loneliness is a mental health condition. We're going to take a look at how protective factors can actually turn the tables when it comes to vaping cessation. And so a really interesting study came out. I posted the link below, and there's actually going to be a link in the handout section, but the Surgeon General posted an 82-page document with research and information about how there is a devastating impact of the epidemic of loneliness. They said that they gave out surveys prior to COVID-19 and found that over half of US adults have reported significant and measurable numbers in regards to feeling lonely. We know that disconnection affects your mental health, your physical health, society's health, community health. And so if we take a look at this, 29% have an increased risk of heart disease. 32% have an increased risk of a stroke, 50% dementia, and 60% can experience a premature death. Those numbers are staggering. To know that people that feel disconnected, isolated, not part of their community can experience very severe physical health as well as mental health. And so it's important to keep that in mind as we learn about ways to connect with self and others. And so I wanted to put this quote in because it really drove home the point of what the whole 82-page summary. It says, our epidemic of loneliness and isolation has been underappreciated public health crisis that has harmed individual and societal health. Our relationships are a source of healing and well-being hiding in plain sight, one that can help us live healthier, more fulfilled, and more productive lives. Surgeon General Dr. Murthy. Given the significant health consequences of loneliness and isolation, we must prioritize building social connection the same way we have prioritized our other critical public health issues such as tobacco, obesity, and other substance use disorders. Together, we can build a country that's healthier, more resilient, less lonely, and of course, more connected. And so as you go through this, I want you to start thinking about how you're connecting with others, yourself, and how you can start prioritizing that today, things that you can start doing in this moment and for the rest of this time, how you can build that connection, how you can reach out and support your community, because people are hurting out there. And so we're going to talk about protective factors. Protective factors are anything that promotes your sense of wellness, your health, gives you a sense of community. We know that social connectedness is the sense of community. It's a sense of belonging, sense of social bonding. All of those things are so important in developing minds. It's when students feel accepted, respected, included, and supported by peers and adults in their school environments. So thinking back, if you were to go back to your childhood, if you're an adult, think about the teachers that stood out to you, right? The teachers that checked in, maybe they shared their lunch with you, they reached out, maybe they were your mentor. This is what it's about, right? That social connectedness piece where the student can feel safe in their environment. And so protective factors can really outbalance some of the mental health issues in addition to nicotine addiction. It starts with somebody recognizing that this is so important. And also to consider protective factors. These are having a safe environment, having values and beliefs, having people to check in on you. This could be success at school, having a caregiver come and check on you, having resources. All of these are protective factors that can counterbalance that sense of isolation. And as we take a look in the next slide, we're going to see that those that lack social connection, the lower school connectedness had significantly higher use of e-cigarettes. So we know that those that don't feel connected are more likely to engage in negative strategies around coping, like e-cigarettes, vaping, and nicotine products. We know, though, going back to social connection, that it can be very meaningful. There's so many benefits, reducing serious health issues, an increased sense of resiliency, your ability to bounce back. It increases your safety. It also decreases symptoms of depression, loneliness, anxiety. It improves your mood. It also improves your body's immune system to recover from illness and disease. And it overall improves your quality of life. And so social connection is something that's so important when it comes to vaping cessation. So let's go ahead and dive into coping skills and relapse prevention. This is going to be probably one of the most important parts of vaping cessation. Is first off, recognizing your cravings, right? So that can be really hard to do, especially if you start off and you're not sure how to stop vaping or you're not sure how to reduce nicotine products. I want you to sit with yourself and ask yourself, what does it look like for me? What happens in my body when I have a craving? Is it a specific time of the day? Is it when I'm bored, anxious, lonely, tired? Is it when I come home and nobody's there to greet me? What do your cravings tell you? And sit with that, knowing that you can accept that cravings are a normal part of it. I think the more that we try to reduce and avoid that, it builds up anxiety and tension in our body. When is it going to happen again? Am I going to be prepared? I can't do it by myself. But if we can accept that cravings are part of the process, it becomes easier to recognize. And that means dropping into your body, recognizing where you're experiencing that craving, that tightness, that pull in your stomach. Maybe you're having throbbing headaches, or maybe there's a specific flavor that you're craving. Just recognizing that creates the awareness so that we can implement these tools and these strategies. One of the best things to do is change your environment, right? So if there's a peer group or a specific place that you love to vape in, change your environment. If you drive a certain way home and you know that that's where you're going to get your vape pens, drive a different way. Sometimes when we change our environment visually, we're more likely to focus on what recovery looks like. And it's so important to normalize that you're not alone. There's so many people out there that are dealing with all types of addiction. I want you to know that you are supported and safe in this environment. We're going to go through more skills, but please, if you have questions, I encourage you to type it in the chat box or reach out to me, because I want this to be something that's feasible and something that's possible if that's something that you want. And so it's important to identify what your triggers are. These are people, places, things. Also, vape pen devices, Juul pods, all of that, you can change that in your environment. It's important to have somebody to talk it through though, whether it's a licensed counselor, a close friend, a mentor, maybe there's a group led by a counselor or a small group at school. Having somebody to talk through it will help you feel better as you make that choice. Of course, movement is so important. Movement and exercise can release your dopamine, your serotonin, all of those feel-good chemicals that happen. And so there's alternatives to that. Also making sure you engage in healthy nutrition, which we'll talk about specifically on how to activate your dopamine receptors with balanced diet, making sure that you're reducing caffeine and sugar and other highly processed foods can actually clear your mind so that when you're coping with the cravings, you can get to the core. Meditation is so important. If anything else fails, if you look through this and you're saying this is a lot, if you can just start with like 2 minutes of mindfulness meditation, that means just checking in with yourself, closing your eyes, just taking a deep breath and just noticing what's happening in your body. Your body is often telling you a lot of things of what's happening, what your needs are. And so if you can take time to engage in any type of guided meditation, you can find on Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is. If you can start with just like 6 or 7 minutes a day, and you can rate your anxiety, your stress on a scale of 0 to 10. And then after you're done meditating, rate it again and see how it's dropped in numbers, and it gives you proof that it can work, right? Over time, you build up this practice. It becomes a lifestyle. Maybe the cravings decrease as the meditation increases. Another great skill is mindfulness. Mindfulness is being present in the moment without judgment. Something that I challenge all of my clients to do is to engage in mindfulness practices each day. And that's something so simple. You can fit it in with your activities of daily living. So what is something that you do at least twice a day? That's brushing your teeth, right? So when you wake up in the morning, instead of grabbing your phone and scrolling through TikTok or Instagram or being subjected to overstimulation, take a moment and take a deep breath. Maybe you do a devotional or a gratitude or an affirmation. You get out of your bed and then you brush your teeth. And the goal is to notice the sensation of the toothpaste, the color. Is it white? Is it green? Is it minty? Does it taste like strawberry? Really tune into all the senses of what you see, hear, taste, and feel for 2 minutes. As thoughts come in about, oh, I have to run to catch the bus, or I have to pack the lunch, or I have a test later, whatever is going on in your head, gently push it out and just get back to that mindfulness meditation of noticing and observing. What this does is it sets the beginning of mindfulness, then your day happens, and then at night when you brush your teeth, you also engage. So it's almost a bookend of mindfulness. It creates a strategy and rhythm of consistency, and it's something simple that you do every day. Also, we'll talk about distraction skills. These are things when the cravings are really high, you're really struggling, you don't have a support system, or you can't get a hold of your friend. Maybe it's hard to leave or change the environment and you feel out of sorts. The best thing to do is a distraction skill. It could be listening to music. It could be going outside and just feeling the sun on your face, even pouring cold water on your face, anything to distract you to get to that next strategy or skill. And the last one I'll leave you is called riding the wave. So with cravings, we know that they pull you in and they build you up. So if you can imagine that you're on the beach and you're looking at the ocean, what happens to that ocean wave? It's the undertow. It pulls you in, it rises, it starts to build, and then it crashes, and then you can notice that inner peace. So you can notice the craving, how it's pulling you in, how you might feel like you're out of control, but you're holding on. You're noticing the tension in that craving build, and then acknowledging it and letting it pass and release to some inner peace and stillness. And so if you feel like you're overwhelmed, imagining a wave, listening to the waves of the ocean crash, that can also be helpful as you engage in mindfulness meditative practices. So moving on to relapse prevention, a plan of action is the best thing you can do when you're breaking any negative habit or cycle. Creating a plan will help you. That means writing it down or putting it on your computer, something that you can have and hold in front of you. When you create a timeline, of when you're quitting, say you decide, hey, by Friday, I'm going to be done, but let me go ahead and create my plan before I do that. So you're really taking a look at your sensory triggers, right? These are the sights, the sounds, the smells, right? Because we know that vape pens have over 250 different flavors. And so there could be specific flavor you love or something you struggle with. So just notice sensory wise, what are those triggers? What comes up for you? Also, what social activities are you engaging in for that connection? You know, maybe after school, instead of going home and being alone, that you go to the library or you go to a green space or a park or you volunteer with somebody, engaging in that social connection piece. Also recognizing when you're feeling stressed, right? When you're stressed, your body's overwhelmed. What is your first instinct? Is it to grab a vape pen? Is it to engage in something else? And recognizing that your daily routine will be part of this recovery prevention plan. And so if you've ever had a friend or if you've heard of somebody that's in recovery, they always say do a 90 and 90. That means once you leave recovery, support systems and whatever you've detoxed from, they want you to go to 90 meetings in the 90 days. That's 3 months. So it takes about 3 months to build this whole life cycle, this new pattern. Being bored and stressed is going to be your biggest trigger for relapse. And so understanding how to fill that time with a daily routine, that is essential. So if you think about your day from when you wake up to when you go to sleep, try to fill it with things that are going to sustain you. And we're going to talk about things in the next slides about how to plug those things in. If you're neurodivergent or if you struggle with, structured time, just create a little broad gap of, hey, between 9 and 11, these are things I hope to achieve, right? But if you want to be more specific, that's also great. Also understanding what unresolved feelings are coming up for you. Is there still this sense of loneliness, sadness? Is there this burning anger, resentment, or guilt? What are those feelings and what are they telling you? And how can we work through the coping strategies to recognize and to hold space for it? And that can be in a form of group support or individual therapy. And so there's 4 major dimensions to recovery. I'll just briefly talk about it. So overall health, how are you managing your physical health, your mental, your spiritual health, all the pieces and parts that make you unique. And so how are you spending time to engage in your health? Also, what does your home life look like? Is there stability? Is there a sense of safety? Do you have a caregiver, a parent or guardian, even a mentor that checks in on you, that asks you some questions about your day? What is your purpose in life? Do you understand your identity, who you are as a person, what you stand for, what you represent? How do you give back and engage with others? And also your sense of community. These are your social networks, your neighborhoods, your community centers that instill friendship, connection, love, and hope. These are all dimensions that are going to be very helpful in the recovery plan and the process. Asking yourself questions about who is there for me? Who do I feel safe with? And how can I reach out to them today to let them know these are my next steps, right? Creating some accountability and support. And so thinking about your coping strategies, these are things that you can do to fill your day. These are things that are helpful even if you aren't struggling with nicotine addiction. If you have anxiety or stress, if your nervous system is constantly dysregulated, then we want to give you these tools so that you can create your own wellness toolkit. And so one of the first strategies is calming. So the calming strategy is really just a category to activate your brainstem. So going back to this brain model, right? So our brainstem, these are the things that can help us regulate it instantly. Taking a deep breath through your stomach or your diaphragm. If you're taking a breath that's through your shoulders, and if you breathe, you're like, only a third of your lung is being filled, it can actually respond your body into sending you to fight or flight. But if you take a deep, full, whole breath, if you take 3 or 4 breaths, it's going to signal your red blood cells that oxygen is coming through consistently and there's no impending danger or things to be alarmed about. And so 4x4 breathing means that you're breathing in by 4 counts, you're holding it by 4, and you're releasing it by 4. And so an easy strategy could be, for example, thinking about a square. You're inhaling, pausing, exhaling. So square breathing or whatever imagery can be helpful as you start this process. If you're feeling a sense of disconnection, maybe your body is shutting down and you're going into a hypoarousal, meaning like you don't want to do anything, you're having a hard time getting out of bed or connecting, then finger breathing or finger trace breathing can be very helpful. It's where you take your hand and an index finger and you start at the base and you inhale, tracing, hold it in, exhale. So you're inhaling and exhaling at a slow rhythm. You're also tracing your fingers, your hands. You're creating a mind-body connection It slows things down and activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and your digest features. This is the homeostasis. This is the sunny day. This is the great day you're having. That's your baseline. Also engaging in yoga. There's so many different types of yoga that can create movement. Also doing it in a group class can create connection. And also it gives you time to breathe and ground yourself. Another strategy that I recommend, it's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So essentially you can do it with your hand, or if you want to just keep it in your mind, you're just going to be sitting down, body neutral, spine neutral, maybe shoulders pulled back a little bit. Take a deep cleansing breath, and then you're just going to notice 5 things that you see around you. It could be a black lamp, a white wall, a blue chair. So you're going to go through the visual space around you, 5 things that you see. Then it's going to be 4 things that you hear. Maybe you hear the fan, or maybe there's another sound outside of your door, or you hear the traffic or the air. That's 4 things that you hear. Then it could be 3 things that you touch. Okay, maybe it's my soft outfit, it's the firm table, the pointiness of a pen. And then you're going to move on to 2 things that you can smell and 1 thing that you can taste. And so for those that struggle with, oh, I don't smell anything, maybe you have an essential oil, or you have something that has a calming scent. In terms of taste, you can carry a hard candy or a ginger chew or something to help you with that sensation. And so we know that slowing down our sensory input can relax our body. When our body is relaxed, our mind is relaxed. And so it can help eliminate and reduce cravings, as well as help with emotional regulation. Progressive muscle relaxation is a tool that I love to use for those that are having issues without acknowledging what's happening in their body, right? So how often do you clench your jaw, right? Do you wake up and your teeth and your mouth hurt? Do you wake up and your shoulders really tight? Did you wake up and like something in your lower back is stiff? So oftentimes unresolved trauma can be stored in our body, as well as emotions, specifically in our hips and other parts of our body. And so progressive muscle relaxation is just a basic guided meditation where it goes through from head to toe, allowing you to tighten and release. So if you can tighten your fist and release, notice how that feels. And so they have meditations that you can find online that help you embody how to relax and target each muscle group. When your body is relaxed, we know that the mind can follow through. Another helpful acronym I like to use is called TIP. This is one of the fastest ways to regulate your nervous system. If you start to feel that craving start to rise in you, if you're feeling, like your thoughts are racing, maybe you're going through the withdrawal symptoms, you're feeling irritable, you're on edge, TIP is going to be probably your best friend for, the first few weeks. The T stands for temperature. So we know that anything cold can regulate our nervous system quickly. So that means cold under your eyes, on your wrist, on your hand, on your lymph nodes, anywhere that you can have a cold temperature, whether it's ice or cold water in the shower, that's going to help your body relax and your mind to soften. The I intensity is for any intense movement. So it could be 30 seconds of jumping jacks, 30 push-ups, whatever that is, just to get your heart rate up. So we know when our heart rate increases, then we tend to breathe deeper, and it helps relax and resolve what's building inside. The P also stands for progressive muscle relaxation, the tightening and relaxing of muscles. And then the last P stands for paced breathing. So you can breathe in by 4 counts, hold it in by 6, and release by 8. The longer your exhale, the more relaxed your body is going to become. Also, if you're in a place or environment where sounds can be a trigger, using noise canceling headphones can be really helpful. And also bilateral stimulation music is really helpful. I can always send a link to those that are interested. It's essentially music that taps your left and your right brain. So we know that with tapping, it actually creates a sense of rhythm, and it coordinates within our brains. It taps our left and our right. So there's music that you can use that can help relax your brainstem and your whole body. Another distraction skill that we talk about is really something that you can do quickly to get to the next thing. So it could be going out in nature, going on a hike, spending time in your backyard, calling somebody that you know. Something quick and easy could be just your favorite scent. Even playing with your pet has shown to reduce cortisol and stress hormones. So engaging with your pet or volunteering at an animal shelter, reading a favorite book, engaging in puzzles to relax your mind, any other creative task or tool, coloring, baking, and of course, engaging in community service, right? We go back to the social connection piece, giving back. that can also foster feelings of wellness. And of course, group exercise or a group activity can be very helpful. In addition to coping skills, we also know that there's physical elements, right? The physical activity, the movement, the running, anything that's going to get your heart rate up is going to increase your serotonin, your dopamine. Anything like that can be from going outside, spending the first 10 minutes of your day in sunlight will actually allow your body to regulate and sleep better. Also, if you need that physical release, throwing down medicine ball slams, having a sensory ball to squeeze, punching pillows, ripping up, paper, anything to release that pent up feelings of, anger or resentment or sadness, jumping rope, and any activity that can engage your body is going to be very helpful. And so if you're looking through these and you're not sure where to begin, I broke it up into these categories so you can start with 2 out of each box each week, right? So it's like, hey, I'm going to start the day with breathing, and then I'm going to end it with reading, and I'm going to make sure that I have some movement throughout, right? So those are simple things to include. I encourage you to pick one of each for your day, but if you just want to start off, pick 1 or 2 and go from there. See what changes in your life. In addition to these strategies, I'm going to talk about how these tools can help you navigate these intense emotions, right? So being prepared to use coping strategies, these are tools that just help you stay regulated. These are things to do every day. The breathing, engaging in a mindfulness practice, developing a sense of yourself, checking in with your body, doing a body scan of what is my body holding on to? Is there a lot of tension in my neck? Okay, maybe I roll my neck and I take a few deep breaths. Maybe I've been sitting for too long and I need to stand up and walk around and maybe connect with a coworker. Also, how are you connecting with nature, your higher power? Your spiritual health can also play a role in your mental wellness. So I encourage you to come up with your own and let me know which ones that you like. And so this one is really cool. I really love talking about dopamine because dopamine plays a pivotal role in our brains, how we feel. It's the feel-good chemical. It helps us stay motivated. It helps us complete the tasks. It's the pleasure-reward response systems. And so we want to keep track of, how you're feeling throughout the day. Dopamine essentially is released in the early morning and then also throughout the day with activities. We know that when you can complete a task or work through something, that could be a small win or a big win, your brain is going to pick up on that. And I think it's important to celebrate those wins, right? Maybe you did really well on your test, or you went a whole week without your vape pen. Those are all great things to celebrate. Celebrate for yourself and share that win with others. Also, going back to protein and what we eat, you're going to see a very colorful image in front of you. There's bananas, there's greens, there's fish, and healthy proteins. Any type of protein is going to be helpful because proteins are they're built of amino acids, which are building blocks for dopamine. And so we know that what we eat impacts our mental health, specifically our gut health, right? There's a lot of studies out there that are showing that our brain and our gut are so intertwined together that they communicate throughout the day. Up to 50% of our dopamine is actually created in our gut health. And so thinking about pre and probiotics, how can you start introducing things that are fermented? It could be kefir, kombucha, kimchi, anything like that that has that pre or probiotic can really help reset your gut system and help you feel better. It's always great to talk to your doctor or physician about any vitamin deficiencies that you may be experiencing. Maybe you have low iron. We know that our B vitamins play a crucial role in our health, especially with depression, anxiety, and other vitamins that could play a role to that. And so thinking about what you eat impacts how you feel. And so I encourage you to come up with, whatever plan works for you in terms of what you eat, but make sure that it's sustainable and something that you enjoy so that it creates a long-term response. So just to talk about therapy, as a therapist, I'm always advocating to reduce the stigma around therapy and mental health. It's just a safe place for you to go to process and identify stressors, support, learn about who you are as a person. Maybe there's unidentified triggers or things that are coming up. And so it gives you a place to process those patterns of addiction, what's behind that. It gives you specific tools that you can use for coping and regulation. It's good to have somebody that you can lean on for that support to gain new insight. And so if you look at the resource sheets that were created, I know that on the parent companion sheet, there's going to be a list of therapy directories. And also there's free resources and tools, free workbooks that you can download and walk yourself through. If you find a therapist or you're struggling, you can find support through those companion resource sheets. And so that's important to look through and share it with people, share it in your community. Maybe you post it on your neighborhood page, or you talk about it at your next PTA meeting. If you're a teacher that's watching, teachers do so much for our community and our students. So I would only encourage you just to share that with another teacher or your principal. Those resource sheets are going to be very handy when handling any emotional health issue. And so that's just good to have printed or to hand out an email. So I encourage you to use it as you wish, but you're going to find a lot of information there. In addition to peer support, we go back to the connectedness, right? How do you feel connected at school? Are there small groups on campus? Do you have access to a mentor? Does the school partner with specific organizations where they come to you and they check in? Are there small peer recovery groups that you can sign up for? Does the school counselor lead groups around anxiety or stress, or do they have lunch bunches or things like that to support the wellness? Anything that the school can offer in terms of connection or mentorship is going to be highly beneficial for both immediate and long-term success of your student, because when they feel safe and supported, they're going to learn and create and develop and become adults and give back to our community, right? So it's this new cycle that we're creating. It also encourages a sense of community and belonging. And so also going to our caregivers that might be watching today, it's important that you have the resources. So your companion sheet's going to have a lot of information. It's going to have the tools, website, Catch My Breath is going to be on there as well. There's going to be a lot of really valuable information for you to have on that sheet. So I encourage you to print it or read through it and get to know that, because there's going to be information on how you can find support for yourself. Maybe you need family therapy to address some things that are going on at home, or maybe it just gives you some guidance as to have conversations, right? Maybe it gives you more information about community resources, and you're definitely going to find some helplines that are going to be very useful as well. All right, so this one is really important, encouraging open conversations, right? So today we're having a conversation about vaping cessation. We talked about mental health, impacts of nicotine, but we want to make sure that we have this conversation and dialogue throughout the child's lifespan, right? So it's important to look for opportunities of natural discussion, right? Making it organic and fun. Something that I always say when you're having a deep conversation is to make sure that the speaker and the listener are well resourced, meaning that they've eaten something, that they've slept, had some type of movement, and are able to connect and receive the information. Otherwise, if you're talking to them from another room, or there's no eye contact or body language to communicate warmth or acceptance, it's going to be really hard to have those conversations when something does potentially happen. And so it's important to connect and encourage those opportunities, having a daily check-in. Studies show that when parents ask their kids, or if caregivers ask their kids where they're going after school, or who they hang out with, or who helps them feel safe or understood, knowing the other kids' parents, their information, the use of vaping drops by 40%. And that's just asking a question like, hey, the who, when, where, right? Who are you going with? When are you going, and when will you be back, right? So having that accountability shows the child that you care and that you're invested in their interests and hobbies. Open-ended questions can be a great place to start, and also establishing the non-judgment and safety. Should something arise that's sensitive, knowing that it's going to be okay because you care deeply about your child and you want to foster and promote healthy living. And so some questions that I came up with are, what are you excited about? Where do you see your life in 5 years? What's something that you'd like to do differently now? What's something that I can support you in? I'm happy to listen, right? And so the tone, the language, maybe they need help with something and they're embarrassed, right? So what's been on your mind recently? Is there anything that you think you could have done differently today? Or who helps you feel safe at school, right? Who is your friend group? What do they look like? Can we have them come over? Getting to know each other, right? These are all important things to establish that conversation. It's all about the tone, reducing distractions, right? There's nothing worse than when you're on your phone and you're trying to talk to somebody, they feel like you're not listening, right? So putting the phone down, creating that space, that support, and really creating a conversation that flows, right? And so real quick, I wanted to touch on some vaping myths before we jump into the question part. So there's a lot of myths out there, and I pulled this. This is called like a pouch, an oral nicotine pouch. They're really popular. They're marketed to help you quit smoking, but we know that they're, very high in nicotine amounts, up to 8 milligrams. And so going back to the myths, right? When somebody's thinking about quitting something or stopping a negative behavior or habit, it's like, oh, I have to vape every day to become addicted, right? And that's not true. Nicotine impacts your brain instantly, and it creates new pathways affecting your dopamine. It can create a cycle of dependence. You don't have to vape every day to become addicted to something. And when people say vapors, the e-cigarette is so much more healthy, they remove the tar, it's only water. It's like, no, it's not. There's other chemicals and harsh things that are impacting lung functioning, causing permanent damage, increasing your heart rate, changing the patterns of your brain development. When people say, the lung inflammation is temporary, I just have to stop and it'll be okay. But even if you stop, there could be some damage. And so making sure you check in with your physician and making sure that you're on top of your physical health. Some people say I can stop vaping, but I can still hold on to like my vape pens. I'm not going to use it right now. I'll let my friend have it. It's best just to get rid of everything. It's important to also understand that sometimes you can't do it alone. So having a positive support system. People are saying vaping decreases my anxiety. I feel good when I use it. I don't have any worries. It's very temporary, right? If you want a long-term healthy lifestyle, it's important to recognize why you use and why you vape. And so also going back to the pouches do not help you quit. They're not regulated. There's actually no limit on the concentration, and you can find these at your near gas station, your vape stores. And so it's just important to understand that there's vape pens, there's pouches, there's all kinds of products out there that are trying to get a hold of our youth's minds, our bodies. And so it's just important to continue this conversation. And I will use this opportunity to see if there's questions real quick. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask, or anything in the presentation that they wanted to know more about? And maybe as you gather your thoughts, I want to jump to one more slide. And so there's a new bill that's introduced, the 88R HB 114, and this is stating that students may be removed or placed in alternative education programs in public schools. This is if, you're caught vaping or using a nicotine product on campus. School policies will vary from district to district, but overall they're stating that they're going to create some alternative suspension programs. But for those that are interested, if you're on the admin side or the educator side, there's all these toolkits that are available. They walk you through how to educate your staff, your community, your students. All of these resources are geared towards schools and programming and tools for parents and teachers, as well as therapists on campus. And so if you can check out these links, it's going to guide you a little bit more about what to expect or how you can help your students succeed on campus, and also alternative options, right? And so we know that, going back to the presentation about connection, community, and so the CDC says the most effective approach to helping students quit tobacco use is through counseling and education, right? So having conversations with your team, your staff, helping your students get through this, parents, caregivers, community members, understanding what that looks like and how you can support. And there's information that I listed as well in terms of alternate suspension program. There's also strategies around vaping cessation. There's free programs out there on heart.org. There's also the Department of Education that came out to say that, when you remove a student, essentially, it can lower their test scores, it can reduce their graduation rates, it can also impact their availability to proceed into higher education and learning. And so just things to consider as you go through this on campus, and also just understanding that there's a lot of gender and race ethnic disparities among campuses and how that can impact alternative programs. I think that's important to remember. But if there's any questions, I know we covered a lot today. This is my information, so if there's something that you want to connect further on, or if you're looking at the companion resource sheets and you're wondering what to do next, you can shoot me an email and I can, follow up with you briefly. We can connect. And of course, I'll be here to answer questions, but I really want to thank Dr. Kelder for giving me this opportunity to coordinate with them about vaping cessation, and also Emily Torres, who created the companion sheets, and everybody else that was part of this, that was behind the scenes. I thank you so much for your time, your energy, and for listening today.
That's fantastic, Shanaz. Thank you so much for this presentation. And I want to remind everyone, if you do have a question, type it in the chat box and I will communicate it. And matter of fact, I see one coming in right now. Ooh, it's a long one.
Okay, let's hear it.
All right, thank you. Here it is. This is from, by the way, it is from, I can't see who it's from.
Okay.
Thank you for this great information. Will you be providing suggestions for curriculum to use when working with secondary school students, especially middle school, who are trying to quit vaping. One
Yeah.
focused, healthy choice and evidence-based program would be preferred. Our program, Communities in Schools, is embedded full-time in schools, so we have a great need and opportunity to work with students during the school day. Thank you, Dr. Ken, Program Manager, Community in Schools.
Absolutely. I think that's a fabulous question. If we go back to this slide, the American Heart Association actually has a PDF where there's an actual toolkit. They're going to walk you through on how to create and develop this type of program. They're going to tell you where to post it, how to connect with your PTA, how to get students and team members involved. And then underneath those two links, there's also resources for that. If you're looking for like direct support around that, those are going to be your best bets. There's also, sorry, I'm going through my notes real quick. There's a number that you can text and they actually can send you a program. So the Truth Initiative, they have a lot of programming for schools. In addition to like Catch My Breath, they have people that can give you more information. They have a program, it's called This Is Quitting. It's a free program. All you have to do is text Ditch Vape, DITCH VAPE to 88709. So it's a free program. It's called This Is Quitting. If you get lost, you can look it up online. It's by the Truth Initiative. If you text them, they'll tag you in and tell you how you can start this program.
Yeah, I might also add the Truth Initiative. It is a great program, and they've tailored it for youngsters, and so it meets that need too. They have a young adult one, and then a teen one too, and so that's a good way. You know, a lot of students don't really. I mean, I hate to say this, Shanaz, but a lot of students don't want to sit down with a counselor. They want to do things digitally, and so for those students who would prefer that, this is a great place to send them off and do it that way. Although I do think there's nothing that can replace what you just presented to us today, that sense of community, the mindfulness. You offered a lot of information, and let me just pause for one sec just to say that, you know, we have 3 handouts. If you go to the box on the right, you can download them, grab them, and there's a lot of good resources, and it covers a lot of what Shanaz covered today. And you know, you gave us a lot of good information. For those of you who weren't able to absorb every single word of this beautiful information, this program, this webinar will be, usually takes a few days for us to get it back up on our website. So if you visit the Michael and Susan Dell Center for Healthy Living website, you can find our webinar series and look at this and review it again. So thank you for letting us do that, Shanaz. Don't forget, these handouts are helpful too. Let's go to the second question. I grew up in a time when lots of people smoked, and you could even smoke in a doctor's waiting room. Well, I could see someone's my age. The restrictions on where one can smoke, etc., helped me decide to quit. Are there attempts being made to stop companies from advertising their product and/or restricting the sale of vape products altogether? You know, this falls under the FDA. And I can say that there have been efforts that have gone on since let's just say the widespread use of vaping in the United States. You may have noticed that Juul was the cartridge devices were restricted in the flavors that they can use. That happened under President Trump. The FDA has plans, etc., for furthering that. If you look at the Netflix. The Netflix show has one set of answers to this particular question too. So it takes time to get regulation enforced and implemented. A lot of the people like me at a university, we do studies so that when the FDA makes a policy change and they're inevitably sued by tobacco industry, that they have a solid evidence base to work from. And so I am hopeful, as you are too, and all of us, that we can move forward on these regulations. And you know, that's part of how we got in this mess in the first place. That Netflix show will show you very clearly that. Back to you, Shanaz.
Yeah, and then I was just thinking, you know, the marketing campaign, right, for vape pens and e-cigarettes, they're now disposable. They have a really low price point. They're not regulating how much nicotine that they're putting into the product so that they can capture that first-time user to make them a lifetime user. And so just recognizing that even though the vape industry is continuing to grow and expand, they're always coming out with new products to capture you. And so I always encourage those to have conversations with their kids or students around the risk around it, or creating programming to help support them so they have other things that they can lean into, right? Going back to the first question you mentioned, like, what are some things you can do at your school? It's like even just going outside on a walk and like having a general conversation, right? That could be something where you're outside the classroom and you have sunlight, fresh air, and maybe part of the toolkit is practicing a mindfulness moment, where that becomes part of the curriculum or part of like a weekly, routine for students. And that could be something specially done by the teacher and their class. And so there's so many unique ways to approach this, but I think it goes back to connecting, engaging, providing that support so that when youth are engaging in these products, that they have hope and a support system to stop, right?
Yeah. School-based programs have been shown to be effective in preventing the use of e-cigarettes. And when they're surrounded by a mass media campaign and a community initiative, they tend to work best. And so it's a combination of school health and mass media. And we can call it small media too, because if you just Google and look at YouTube, you can find lots of prevention programming messages that have been created by the Truth Initiative or American Heart Association or the FDA, et cetera. And you can show those in your classroom. As part of what I recommend to schools is to show. A lot of these messages are fantastic, and they've done a really thorough job trying to figure out the best way to reach kids, vulnerable kids. Sometimes we call them kids who are high sensation seekers because they're looking for new things all the time, and unfortunately they got trapped in trying a new thing that had a mango flavor that just so happened to be addicted, and they ended up becoming addicted without even knowing there was nicotine in there. So yeah, I like visiting the Truth Initiative website, and there's Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids is another place to go, and then the Catch Global Foundation too. They have a lot of resources there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Anything else that's coming through the chat box?
Let's see, unless I'm going the wrong way. No, we didn't have as many questions as I thought we might. I think that's because you were so very thorough. And so I guess we're just about out of time. And I just want to thank you again, Shanaz, for this wonderful presentation. It'll be up and online in a few days. You can visit it and revisit it and find the handouts again too. Also, don't forget about Catch My Breath if you're interested in the school-based program. Oh, I should have mentioned, this is a shameless plug, I suppose. We have created a parent toolkit, which has some of the information. It leans more towards prevention, but also has some of the information that Shanaz said today. But with that, I guess we will close today's webinar. And thanks again, Shanaz.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Okay, bye-bye.